In this lesson, we're going to be discussing graphing functions in general form by translating the parent function. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the absolute value function. Translating a graph means that I'm going to be moving my graph horizontally or vertically. When I move a graph horizontally or vertically, it's called a translation. That means that every point on the parent graph is going to be moved either to the left, to the right, up, or down. A graph must be in general form in order to translate it. So that means I have to have something that looks like a times f of x minus h plus k. The a is going to give me the direction of my graph. So that means either I'm going to be upward facing or downward facing. A also gives us a little bit more information such as the magnitude, which could be how wide or narrow the graph is. In our case, we're just going to stick to being able to draw a very quick sketch of our graph, which means A really is just going to give me whether I'm upward or downward. H is going to give me the horizontal shift of my graph. So if H is positive, meaning that this inside portion is x minus h, my graph is going to be shifted to the right. If I have x plus h, that means the h is negative, which means my graph will shift to the left. K is going to give me the vertical shift of my graph. So if I have a positive K, I'm going to be shifted up, but if I have a negative K, I'm going to be shifted down. Let's take a look at this in action by looking at an absolute value function. So the general form of an absolute value function is f of x equals a times the absolute value of x minus h plus k. So if I want to graph this absolute value function here, so I have f of x is equal to the absolute value of x minus 2 minus 3. We start off with our parent function, which is the absolute value of x. That's what I see right here. Since the a value is a positive 1, it's going to remain the way that it is, which is upward facing. Minus 2 means that I'm going to be moving my graph 2 places to the right. Minus 3 means I'm going to be shifting 3 places down. So here's my parent function that is in black, and then my new shifted function, which is x minus 2, absolute value of x minus 2 minus 3, shifted into its correct position. We can now find the domain and the range of this absolute value function. So if I have f of x equals the absolute value of x minus 2 minus 3, my domain is going to be the same as the parent function. There's no restriction on the x value, so the domain is going to remain all real numbers. However, if we look at the parent function again, it looks like my y values are only positive values. So I have from 0 all the way to infinity. Now that I've shifted my graph, I've shifted my y values by moving my graph downwards 3 spots. That means that the smallest y value I can have is actually negative 3. So my range is from negative 3 all the way to infinity. Let's review what we talked about in this lesson. If I'm translating a function in general form, which is a times f of x minus h plus k, a is going to give me the direction of my graph, whether I'm upward facing or downward facing. H is going to give me the horizontal shift. So that means if I have x minus h in here, the h is positive and the graph is going to shift right. If I have x plus h, that means the h is negative and the graph is going to shift left. K is what's going to give me my vertical shift. So if I have a positive K, I'm going to shift up. If I have a negative K, I'm going to shift down. And that completes our very basic review of translating functions and looking at the absolute value function.